normal school? Is that like preparatory school?
Indiana.
It's like Indiana University now, but it was called normal school at that time.
And where did you teach?
1 year out in Brady Township, and the rest of my teaching was done in Curwensville area.
And what year did you retire? Do you remember?
1978.
You even taught over here in our, what we call our new
Elementary, too.
elementary building, right? And Florence also was a teacher. What did your education consist of?
High school and teacher's examination. At that time, there was only 7 years or 7 months of school. You got paid. I got paid $45 a month the first year, and the second year, $65 a month.
A month.
Yes,
Mhm.
and I taught 2 years is all.
And I believe Aunt Grace taught a little longer, didn't you?
Well, I went to Indiana Normal and graduated, and then I taught 3 years, and then I got married. And after when any lady got married, you were not allowed to teach school.
Oh, you weren't allowed to teach after you got
No, you
married.
weren't allowed. You had to quit.
Mm-hmm.
And then later I taught 3 more years.
I see. And there today are several nurses in the bunch, but we're now looking at my mother, Alfreda Way. Freddie, most people refer to her as, and I believe you went into nurses training. You were the only one of the originals who went into nurses training. Is that right?
That's right.
And what was it about quitting nurses training? Why did you quit?
Well, our mother was an invalid, and my 2 sisters at home were going to quit school because they thought they had to, and they were in high school, and there wasn't any reason I couldn't get a leave of absence, so I took it, and then I never went back.
Wasn't there something about nurses training? You weren't allowed to be married in nurses training either?
Not at that time.
Uh-huh. And you, of course, married Robert Bloom.
That's right.
And these ladies are all, these 3 ladies are widow ladies, and Viola's husband is still living. And what was his former occupation?
Byron?
Uh-huh.
Oh. He worked in the clay mines, and he worked at the stone quarry running a hoisting engine, and he worked at the tannery, and he ended up by being on maintenance at the tannery for quite a few years.
And I believe he tells a tale of how what they used to do with the animals as far as grazing and so forth is concerned. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, they took their cattle out to Greenwood and past Greenwood, and they were pastured out there all summer.
And no one stayed out there to take care of them?
Oh, no, they didn't take care of them. They'd go out on Sundays and see if their fence needed repaired. They had quite a few acres of woods and so forth fenced in. That was Chestnut Ridge area, the people that took their cattle out there.
Mm-hmm.
And he tells a story of helping Ben Hartshorn. He had taken his sheep out, and the sheep, 2 of them were going to have lambs, so he didn't take them. And later he had the 2 lambs on the back of a buggy, a carriage, and 2 sheep, the sheep behind, and they were pulling back, not wanting to go. So he called across to Byron's home and asked if he would help him take those sheep on out. And Byron did, which must have been a distance of 4 miles or more. And he rode back in the buggy part way with him. And then he got out and took a shortcut down around toward Bailey side or something. And he gave Byron all the way 3 pennies.
How old would he have been whenever he,
Oh,
do you have any idea?
10 years old or something.
About 10 years
I don't
old.
know, he wasn't very old.
And of course I know the history of my father. He was a miner. Mother, where were some of the mines that were working at the time whenever, like when you and Daddy got married?
Well, he worked at the hard clay mine on Chestnut Ridge, and he worked out of Drucker mine toward Uthersburg. part-time, and Hartshorn up Knowlton Road.
Okay, and the Hartshorn mine is the last one that I can recall that was open, at least in the area, and that sits right out at the tip of Knowlton Road where you turn what we used to call Cuckoo's Nest, and you turn right to go down the back way to Clear. Anyway, the Hartshorn mine was the last one that he worked in. What was probably the furthest mine away from our area that he ever had to go to?
That was probably about 20 miles out toward Luthersburg and Drock.
In the Drockers mines, and that's what we call the Drockers Woods today.
Yes.
How did he ever get 20 miles away?
There were friends that did have a car, and they drove, and they took out along supplies enough to do them for their 2 or 3 days' work, and they spent that time in a shanty, a little shanty.
And then they would come home after the work was done.
That's right.
I remember my dad saying something about the rats in the mines. Do you remember anything about that?
Oh yes, he said they never killed a rat because they got a warning if there was danger. The rats all began to leave the heading. They could sense the creeping of the clay, and they knew they get out, then the miners got it.
And for light in the mines, what did they use for light? It would have to have been dark.
But they had carbide lights that they put on their hats. They burned carbide in the little light.
And I believe Aunt Florence is holding a little light that we think probably was from the Civil War time. Is that correct?
Yes.
That it is.
It was a camp light
And they hooked it on
for
the
the soldiers.
front of their hat, right? As the miners did the carbide lights. They never carried a lantern or anything else in with them
I don't think so. They,
No.
into the mines.
oh,
I
no,
mean.
they just had their carbide lights.
And then lots of times they could they even stand up in them, or did they mostly have to dig on their hands and knees?
Oh, they usually could stand up in the clay.
But in the coal
In
mines.
the coal mines, sometimes it was very low, and they did their mining just laying down.
And all 4 of your husbands were really miners, weren't they, at one time or other?
Did Clarence work in the clay mine? He did, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
Byron did too.
I don't
Mhm.
know whether he actually mined or did.
Clarence, he did. Yes, he did.
So the mines were as much a part of the history of Curwensville and Pike Township as the quarry, which we have heard an awful lot about. And I think you're holding a picture that we think was taken in the early 1900s, and the little boy along the side we believe to be, or we know to be, my uncle, my father's brother, William Bloom. The passenger on the seat is to be my father, Robert R. Bloom, and his father driving, Benjamin Bloom. And you can see from the size of the stone, and there are, 6 horses pulling it.
3 teams.
And that was a large stone from the Roaring Run quarry, right?
That's right. They
Oh.
were hauled down. They were hauled down close to the brickyard where they had a big saw, and they split the stone, and then it was shipped out of town.
They split the stone at the brickyard.
No.
No,
Right
no.
near the brickyard.
Oh, near
At
the
the
brickyard.
Roaring Run.
Just
You know where that
Just before
roaring
the-
run. You know where the roaring run siding used to be, where they put the marker.
Oh, is that where they cut them?
Yes.
Cut them, I
it
see.
was right in that area, right beside the road.
But they were quarried out on Chestnut Ridge at the Snyder Stone Quarry. They call it the Snyder, out on Chestnut Ridge.
And then they were
Hauled
horsed in like that.
Mhm.
Uh-huh.
They weren't all hauled by horses.
How would they have
There
gotten?
was there was a dinky track that went to the quarry a long time ago.
Yeah, and I don't remember when they used that track.
And-
It was all- we
But
walked
Byron remembers when he said his dad even hauled some of stone with one
With one horse.
horse. I mean with a 2-horse team, with one team.
Speaking of the dinky, now what was the dinky?
Well, that was just a little locomotive that hauled, they used to have one that went to the clay mines, and they had little clay cars, and
It went from the brickyard.
it went to that went from the clay, from the brick plant up to the old clay mines. And if you walked the distance from Curwensville, you walked more than 3 miles. But on Saturday nights, Dad used to take us in one of those clay cars and give us a ride down to the brickyard.
Without any engine.
Yeah, without any engine. We just rode down in one of those cars.
How'd you get back up?
We had to walk
You had
home
to
then
walk.
after the movie.
Oh, you went to the movie. How often did you get to town, like to do shopping? Whenever you were young girls, was there such a thing as going to town to buy anything?
If we needed shoes.
Shoes were about the only
If
thing?
we needed shoes, Dad took us to Robinson's shoe store and fitted us out with shoes. If we needed a coat, he took us and bought us a coat. Everything else of the clothesline our mother made. And one time, Florence got a beautiful coat and I got an ugly one. And one time she got such beautiful high-top shoes. And the reason, I didn't get them, but the reason she did, Florence says, it was the only thing in the store that would fit her. And they cost a lot more than hers did. But we
Was there much fighting and bickering between you as such a large family?
we learned a lot of fighting.
No.
Wasn't any fighting.
No fighting.
No.
Everybody got along fine.
No, our dad used to say he didn't care how noisy we were, as long as it was all in fun.
Happy noise, huh? Okay, back to the dinky. It seems to me that I recall one of you mentioning one time when your mother was very ill. Didn't the doctor have to come to your house on the dinky or something?
The road was impassable from the deep snow. That was during the flu epidemic, and she had pneumonia. And Dr. Blair rode up on this dinky to the mine, and then they had to walk maybe a half a mile, quarter to half a mile up to our house. And he came up there pretty often to see her because she was really critical.
And wasn't there something special about how you girls had to, the older of the girls had to take over? And can you tell me quickly, like, how she was treated?
Well, Grace wasn't there. She was going to normal school.
I see.
And so our first brother was 10 months old, and somebody had to hold him because Mother was sick and we didn't dare let him cry. So Viola and I, we had to, well, Freda had the flu first, and she was over it. So Viola and I, we had to take over until our 2 aunts came Friday afternoon, and Grace came from normal. And then they made onion poultices, and that was what cured her. Saved her.
How did you prepare the onion poultices?
Well, 2 great big iron frying pans on a kerosene foil stove upstairs in the hall.
Right outside of her bedroom.
Right, and the 2 aunts, and I suppose Grace, my uncle brought a half bushel of onions, and the onions were fried, and made the poultices, these hot poultices. And I don't remember whether they put them on the back or the chest or both places.
Well, I remember something about it that Aunt Sadie was the one that she wanted to put these poultices on, and Dr. Blair said it wouldn't do any good, but if she wanted to do it, well, she could. And she just knows that, what saved Mother's life.
And there were how many children at that time? 8?
It was 10 because our brother was 10 months old.
Oh, I see.
Well, wasn't that the same time they found your Beale earprint?
No, that's later.
Oh.
And what did they do about didn't someone tell me they did something with the air of the room to make it It was winter time, you say?
Yes, it was cold weather.
And what did
But
they
the
do?
doctor, at that time, the doctors, we had Dr. Blair, and he was doing the best he knew how, but he thought she had to have absolutely fresh air. And so they removed the window, put like a sheet over, and we did have sheets fixed so she wasn't in a draft, but there was that cold air. And nowadays, when you have pneumonia or something wrong with your heart or your lungs, they don't allow you to even go outside when it's too cold. They find it different.
And as I recall, Mother tells me that you sort of took turns between babysitting and manipulating these hot policies, and you would go till you were either frozen from going in the cold room or worn out, and you would punch the one who was laying down and say, I have to crawl in for a little bit, and took turns. Is that right?
Well, I think of the policing, and our aunts did that mostly.
I see.
Right.
Because they had come and they were so worried.
And we're all familiar with what we call what we used to call the children's home. Now it houses the Clearfield County Home Health program. But as I recall, my father told me the children's home was just going into being built at about the time of the big flu epidemic. And do you recall anything about how they used the children's home at that time?
They did not have any windows in the children's home yet, and they strung wires up or lines and had the different rooms separated by sheets. And it was filled with flu patients from all around the area, and they died just about as fast as they put them into that.
And about what year was that?
1919 was it?
1919, or the fall of 1918.
Well, they had the same setup at the Moose Hall in
And they did the
Curwensville.
same at the Moose Hall.
Even out on the porch, there was an upstairs porch, and they had cots out there. They brought in cots. And
See, they believed at that time that this real cold air treatment was the best thing for the flu that they knew to do. And probably it killed more of them than itself.
and aspirin was the only medication they were giving.
I see.
That's all they had.
I also, with my mother, Alfreda's little back history in nurses training, I also know that she was one of old Dr. Earhart's choice people to come at the time of the birth of a baby. So she was many times in other homes helping. Do you remember about how many babies you helped with?
I believe there were 25, counting my own, that I was present at the birth.
Did you help with any of your sisters?
Yeah, some of them.
How about the sisters that are here?
Well, I was with my sister Florence for, what, 1, 2, 3,
And waiting for our listeners.
4 of yours. And I wasn't with you when you had only Margaret Root.
I don't think.
Yeah, Margaret Root was all, one for Viola.
We kind of tease my mother a little bit. We say because she was helping Aunt Florence on the very day that she was married and was a little bit late for her wedding, so we always tease her and say she was late for her wedding because she was busy having a baby. But I think Daddy always forgave her for that. Back to children. And Viola, what, your family, how many children did you have?
We have 3 of our own.
Uh-huh. And are they in the area, and who are they?
Grace Boggalier lives up at Stronach, but they have Buzzard Store. And our son Gerald is at Mahoopany, Pennsylvania, and he has retired from Procter & Gamble. He was in service for 23 years. And our daughter, Margaret Ruth, married to Bert Jameson in Warren, Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
And she has, well, if you want to know how many children we have, maybe I'll forget. 3 children, 9 grandchildren, 11 great-grandchildren, and 1 great-great-grandson. We're very proud of every one of them. They're beautiful.
Aren't they all? Okay. And beside myself, mother,
Your
had
family.
you had,
I
you,
have Jesse. We had the 2 boys, which we didn't get to keep, our first and last baby, but we raised 2 daughters, Jessie Gerhardt and Margaret McFadden.
and Aunt Florence?
I raised 5 children, and my oldest one, Louise Hartsfeld's the only one in this area. And I have 10 grandchildren and 7 great-grandchildren.
Didn't you lose a son with one of the epidemics? Didn't he have diphtheria or something? What did Henry die from?
My 3rd son had, he had whooping cough. And when that was about the time they started giving whooping cough shots. And he had,
Like a meningitis.
he had whooping cough pneumonia. And then our 2nd son was 20 when he was killed in Germany.
In the Second World War.
Yeah.
Okay. And Aunt Grace, I know you didn't have any
No,
any
Okay.
blood children, but you have one daughter. How?
Oh, I have more than one. I don't have any of children of my own, but I claim several. And one of them is my niece that we had from the time she was 10 weeks old.
Mm-hmm.
And she's the one that takes care of me now.
And she is?
Oh, Alnora Weiss Carr,
Okay, and her father was?
Gilbert Weiss.
Uh-huh. And where does she live now? Okay, let's go back one more time to your early childhood. What did you ever do for amusement with a family of that size?
Oh my goodness. I recall we popped a lot of popcorn evenings, and
Made happy.
yeah, we had a Kathy Polk, and I can't remember too much, excepting square dancing in the area was a prominent thing, and they had at different homes. Usually, I remember many of our homes, and they even, what did they even dance on our front porch at one time or not?
We had that barn.
Is that how the old barn dances originated, do you suppose?
Well, there were enough around in the area. If anyone had a space, they had a square dance, and we had the regular fiddlers that came every time, and all the kids went that could go.
Did whole families go, or just...
Lots of people took their children, but I guess they were not as large a family as ours.
Well, I think a lot of the time Mother wasn't able to go, but Dad took Florence and I to a lot of square dances,
And he was a caller.
and he taught us to dance when we were only about 10 years old,
And your father was a caller.
Very good caller.
and a very good dancer.
Uh-huh. Yes, I know my father was a caller also. And he danced while he called, which they don't, and of course they didn't have a microphone then.
Almost didn't
no.
need any.
He always carried a lemon and kept squeezing lemon juice in his mouth.
Do you remember anything back as far as, like your early Christmases, what you might have gotten for Christmas, for instance?
I remember as a child getting up Christmas morning, and our dad had placed, Santa Claus had placed a row of plates on our living room couch. And I was the first one down, so I went along and I picked everything off every plate that I wanted. And when my dad got up, he told me what was for who. Now that's the first I remember about Christmas. But we had nice Christmas. We always had a beautiful live tree, and we had candles that Dad had gotten someplace that hooked on the limbs, and they had a round ball, weight, hanging on the end, so the candle had to stand straight up.
And we always got a book from the time we could read at all. was one of the things we get.
Oh, and my first recollection of a doll baby was, or maybe it was my last one, was a black china head, no doll. So later on, that's when I began to sew. I made the doll body and stuffed it. And then I began to make doll clothes, so I must have been about 9 when I got that
Well,
head.
I can remember when I was in first grade, and when we went back to school after Christmas, all the kids were telling how the wonderful Christmas tree they had and all the things they got. And we didn't have very much, but I made up a story. I don't remember telling very many lies, but I did that day.
I didn't remember that was fantasy.
But from the time, like Florence said, from the time we could read, every kid got a book. But the little ones got dolls. Or I know they did.
Always.
And one Christmas, the first time I remember a mother having something hidden, I found it. It was a little blue, like graniteware tea set, you know, cups and saucers.
I remember that tea set.
Well, that was supposed. So I asked her about it, and she said, well, Santa had brought it, and that was going to be mine, but I wasn't to tell anybody else about it. But we had, in the winter, we did a lot of coasting, and Dad even went coasting with us. And the winter Florence and I were in 7th and 8th grade. All the young people in the neighborhood coasted down our hill
These all.
in the evening. And we just had wonderful times. And at the schools, we didn't know we were poor. We weren't. We had everything we needed. If any young person in the neighborhood had a birthday, it was celebrated with a party. And
Alfreda remembers more about it than I do of the community 4th of July picnics that they had out on Chestnut Ridge in Goss's Grove. And what I remember about it was just the big, big freezers of ice cream, homemade ice cream they had.
And they filled up their clothes baskets, and it took the mother and the father to carry them, and we went out, and where that grove was out where Buell's, you know, on the other
Buell's
side.
Pond and so
Mhm.
forth, I remember.
Out toward Greenwood.
And they would play, the men would play baseball, the men and the boys. And Alfreda, what do you remember the most about that?
About that, the big long rope swing. There were 2 big long rope swings, and I always felt that our dad might have taken the ropes from the barn and put those swings for the deck. Don't you remember those swings?
well, he did a lot of things. That would be one of the things he might do.
One of the most hardships that I can think of that we had to put up with part of the time was carrying water. And when we lived up at Bridgeport, we had to go down a long flight of steps, down the road a ways, and then down over another bank and carry pails of water up to that house. When the well got down, we even had to carry it for washing. And I vowed then that that would be my first requirement if I ever had a home of my own. I had to have running water.
And was it? Did you get it?
I've never lived in a house where I had to carry water. We had a pump one place. We've had water, thank goodness.
Well, I think the first time we ever got running water, I believe I was about 5 years old, and Santa Claus brought my mother a little red wagon so she could run while she hauled the water with me in it.
Right?
And after that, I don't believe we had running water till I was in 4th grade when we moved from Pike Township to Knowlton Road in Curwensville.
And our heating problem in our homes, that it was that way all over. A kitchen stove and the living room heating stove maybe some people had 2 stoves. And the winter time, we had to take our bath in a wash tub beside that stove.
A big wooden
We had a big wooden one, but lots of people didn't have the wooden ones.
All right, and the bathroom was, at that time, the bathing room then became the kitchen became the bathing room right next to the stove. And,
Well, we did that in the living room.
and because of the shortage of water, you started with the youngest one and kept adding another tea kettle of hot water, right?
Probably.
I remember that myself.
And the nice warm outside toilets with Sears Roebuck catalogs for tissue.
Right.
Don't put that in.
Well, why not?
That was the way it was.
All right, we're getting kind of like to the good old days. And I know, because I was born during that time of the Depression years, can you think of anything that you'd like to add about those Depression years? What might have, you know, that makes you remember them more than something else?
Well, my husband, we had chickens and a cow and horse and things, but there was no money, it was everything else. But my husband would dig husk corn for corn and things like that to feed some of the animals with stuff we didn't have, didn't bring us. But we were very fortunate because we had a little farm.
And we were very fortunate because we lived close by Florence, and she kept us supplied with all the skim milk and eggs, I guess, too, if we needed them. I don't know what all, but I know milk was one thing we were never without.
Did Uncle Byron work at the tannery during the Depression years, Aunt Viola?
No, part of the time he worked for, what did they call it? He worked down on the ball field and, what?
WPA?
Yeah, whatever they called it. You got relief, but you worked
Yeah,
out
that was
the hours.
WPA.
And it wasn't a very big pay. You had an awful time living on it, but we managed. And another hardship, though, was when we was going to high school and happened to walk 4 miles through deep snow lots of times.
Do I recall someone saying something about you went at times on the train?
We couldn't go on a train to school.
Didn't the train go somewhere between here and...
No, just a little dinky went between our farm and town.
I see.
We walked from out at where Barr's farm is now, which was the David Way farm at that time. Alfreda and Florence and I would walk into school. And one
Now,
time,
this is on the road to Greenwood now, up Ridge Avenue, and we go toward
No, you
Greenwood.
don't go toward Greenwood.
Oh,
you turned left out there at Sellner's.
oh, at Benny Sellner's.
Yeah,
where
went
the
back out the road
okay.
there a mile to
Turn
the
left
end of the
that
road.
way, down toward where Eddie Morgan now lives.
And we had been late for school a couple of times. And Mr. Santee was our science teacher. And he wanted to know if we had some excuse for being late, and we just told him how far we had to walk, and he said, there isn't any transportation, no train, no nothing that you can ride on. And he told us we could be, anyone that wanted to go to school that badly could be late as often as they wanted to.
I wonder
And
if
we
our
wore
teachers
black.
would be that.
Black buttoned-up leggings that went above our knees. And one morning, I was the only one going from Chestnut Ridge at that time to high school. And I was carrying 2 empty 5-gallon kerosene cans to leave at George Whitaker's hardware store to be filled for my father to pick up on Saturday. And because I caught a ride with a neighbor, I froze my feet, and I had to get out at the upper end of Ranch Avenue and run down with no feeling in my feet at all. That was one of the things that we remember.
With your total of years and years and years, the memories are really remarkable. I wish we could record all of them. I also know that your brother, George Way, who now lives in Wyalusing, Pennsylvania, came back during the 1986 football season here in Curwensville, and he was a member of that football team of 1936 that celebrated their 50-year get together at one of our football games this year. How about you girls? Do you remember anyone who might have been in your class, whether they are still living or not today? Aunt Grace, how about you?
Well, still living are Margaret Hips and John Wright and Viola Hoffman, Alice Murray, Mitchell. I don't, there's probably some more, but I remember Sam Cruikshank and Esther Neefer and oh my, I can think of all of them. You don't want.
They're not living,
No, there's the ones that are gone.
How, and you were married to Clarence Bell, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Aunt Florence, how about, yeah, do you remember anyone who was in your class?
Oh, I remember them all. We're only about 17, but the ones that are living now are Joseph Epps, Ines Gerard, and Lily Olson. And as far as I know, Sarah Carstetter and Dottie Hake. But what about Dorothy Miller? She's dead, wasn't she? No one else.
No one else. And Mother, you said that as a youngster, what grade were you in when you went to play at the Patton home?
Oh, I was the first grader, I believe.
And what was the Patton girl that you played with?
Nora Jane.
Nora Jane.
She's a very pretty little girl, and she always had nice hair ribbon, which I never had. Yeah, she lived in the big stone house that used to be by the laundromat.
The large stone house that just burned this last fall, yes. Okay, how about your high school class? Do you remember?
Well, I remember distinctly David McKinley, who died within the last year. He lived in State College. He was connected with the college over there. And they lived in the big stone house by that time. David McKinley and William Kittle Parker and Dorothy LaRock. I have no idea, but I think that Dorothy LaRock may still be living. Mary Phillips did. Mary Harley is living. Mildred Hauser is living. But Marjorie Wall, Cinda Clark. You know who all might. We haven't heard of her
No,
years.
right in your own class.
How about him?
You're still living. You were in my class too.
Yeah, Viola Irwin.
Why were you two in the same class?
Well, I had a siege of sickness in my freshman year and had to go the second year. I had gone 2 years in the 8th grade like my dad wanted me to go, and she didn't have to go the 2 years. And then I was sick and missed part of the first year. That made me 2 years behind my regular.
And I believe that Joe Arrigo maybe
Wasn't
was.
in our class. He
The
went
one next to it, he was a junior.
He was a junior when you were a senior.
Joe and Margaret Rigo,
And Margaret.
Margaret Crittenden, and where Margaret Appice came in. She was good.
Rose Sandry went about that time.
Rose Bloom Sandry.
I remember her there. She was an elocutionist, very good.
And turned into a very good teacher as years went by. Before we close, we want to mention too that of this original 12-member family, all but 3 of them did graduate from the Curwensville High School. And as far as we know, all of them were honor students, and among 2 of them sitting here at least, are there more, who were valedictorians. We want to say also that stemming from this J.V. Way family, we have now fanned probably the entire United States. The one sister, Elsie, is now living in Vancouver, Washington, and the stems from the branches have gone far and wide, and we won't begin to try to count them. Well, I think we'll try to bring this interview to a close, and it has been a real pleasure for me, especially because having my mother and my aunts here with me, but I think they have contributed a lot to our memories of the past for the Pike Township Curwensville Historical Society. And if none of them have anything else they want to add to us, add to the film, I just want to tell them thanks and so much. And I think whether they have voiced it or not, we have come to believe that the good old days probably really were the good old days. It certainly didn't do any one of those original any harm for them all to still be living to these beautiful ages, as we see all four of these well over 80. And so we'll say goodbye to Aunt Grace Bell,
Goodbye.
Aunt Florence Hawk, my mother, and Aunt Viola.
Best wishes.
Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, Margaret.
Hmm.
We're making a tape for the Curwensville Pike Township Historical Society. It is Saturday, December the 5th, 1987. We are at Temple Heights in Curwensville and approaching the home of Mr. and Mrs. R. Joseph Hipp, better known as Soupy and Verna.
Come in.
Hello, Soupy. Happy holidays.
Welcome to the...
Thank you. We have John Hoover. We're making a tape this afternoon for the Curwensville Pike Township Historical Society. All of our guests are over 80 years of age. The person doing the interview is Laura Wright, wife of John Wright. I'm Ann Thatchett, and our cameraman is John Hoover. We'll start by having each one of our guests introduce themselves, give their age, and where they lived in Curwensville. Soupy?
Well, we're going to start with me. I'm Joe Hipp, Joseph Hipp. The reason why I say Joseph is because there were two Joe Hipps. The other was Sparky Joe, and I went as Soupy Joe. So the old timers will probably remember me as Soupy. I was born in Curwensville, over in Center Street, in a house in which my mother was taken in when she was just a baby and lived there her life. Then she married, and my dad bought the house and fixed it up, and that was our home. 1937, wasn't it? Yeah, we got married. We fixed the duplex out of that home, and we continued to live there for about the next 20 years. In 1956, we moved to go up here in the hill, and I moved up here. As I say, I spent my entire life in Curwensville. Went to school here. I started school out in the south side there in the old wood building, which later became known as the election house. They used it down when they built the brick building. Maud Elder lived across the street from us on Center Street. Was my first teacher. Went to the grade schools in Curwensville. Graduated in 1920. Was out a year and then went to Grove City and college, and 4 years there and graduated there in 1925. I said I come back here, we worked with my father, he was a butcher, and we had a little meat market and grocery store for a few years, and I worked with him. And then later got into the Department of Public Welfare and worked there for 36 years and retired in 1970. Since then, we've been residing here. Now, I think the first I should have begun to get introduced to my wife, Verna. Verna McGarvey Hitt. She's not a native of Curwensville, but we accept her anyway. She's from Pike Town, they're from Chef Township up here, and she's been here for about 60 years, so she considers herself pretty well a resident. Well, that's me up to date on my background. So.
All right, let's move on.
My name is Anthony Arrigo. Everybody knows me as Bucket, most quite good on it. I was born in Pike Township, what was Billy Quarry at the time. And in 1910 we moved to Curwensville. And we moved to a home that was right above the B&O Railroad crossing. It was the first home there. And it was a big home. We lived there 2 or 3 years. Then we moved to Southside. We got to be a neighbor of Suki's. We stayed there 2 or 3 years. And we bought our present home on Silver Street in 1917. I've lived there since. 1970 we lived there. 1917 we moved there. I started school at the Patton Davis School at the time. Miss Debbie Reed was my teacher, first grade teacher. She was an institution at the time. She was very good too. And I went to school. In the 3rd grade, John's aunt flunked me on account of my writing.
And Cora?
And
Cora Haley.
I went to up there until the 5th grade. Then I went to the Locust Street School for about a half a year. And then we transferred to the Southside School. They built the brick school there. And the first year we went to the 6th grade there. Then we went to the 7th, 8th, and 9th grade to Patton Davis School. In 1917 I went to the brickyard to start working. And I worked there 5 years. And I worked at Elk Canning for 5 years. And I worked at Pennsylvania Hide and Leather for a few years. Then I worked at a paper mill a few months in Potter County, Austin. And I worked at the hosiery mill. And then I went in business for a while, a bigger business. Then I went to work for the state. I worked 2 years. And I was out of a job for 2 days. And they got me to be the steward at the SOI Club. I was there 8 years. And then I worked 8 years on the highway, and then I retired. I've lived in Curwensville all my life, and I've really enjoyed Curwensville. I'm a guy in Curwensville.
Tony, all the industries that you mentioned were in Curwensville except Austin, except the paper mill in Austin. These were all Curwensville industries. Yeah.
I passed papers too.
How about the next Arrigo?
My name is Joseph O. Arrigo. I also was born in Bailey Quarry in 1906. And when we moved to Granting Road, the old Granting Road, the house Tony spoke about, was owned by the B&O Railroad. And we moved from that, just a couple of years there, and that's when I realized I was Joe Arrigo. And we moved to Southside. We lived in the old Sam White house. Suki, I remember the Ammermans and the Hipsters and the Myers, oh my, those were the glory days. Then when we moved over into the Bender house there on Silver Street, across from the ice plant, we lived there ever since. I spent all my life here. I'm a graduate of Curwensville High School, the University of Pittsburgh School of Pharmacy. I'm a little ahead of myself. I worked when I was a boy. I was a shoe shiner. I was the king of the boot blacks, they called me. I worked for Tanner's. Leonard was my boss at one time, and his three brothers, two brothers ahead of me. One got me my job in pharmacy when I went to Pittsburgh when I was going to school. I wouldn't make it. Allie. And then I worked for Mr. Live, the man that trained me. After I got out of high school, I was there for a year and went to school. When I came back, I went with Whitman and Tia for 11 months, and then I started at the city drugstore with the other Joe Hitt, Sparky Hitt. And we were partners there for 7 months, and then I stayed. And then I served 32 months in the United States Army during World War II, stationed in Germany, and I've been here ever since. I retired in 1976 after being over 40 years in the drugstore, which recently burned down. So there's no other town but Curwensville, and I'll spend the rest of my days here.
Might be a good place to say that you're Tony's brother.
Oh, yes. I'm proud of the fact that Tony's my older brother. I have a younger brother, Harold, and a sister that died in 74. 72. Mother died in 74.
Thank you. John?
My name is John H. Wright. I was born in Curwensville and in an old brick house up on the hill. And I lived, I'm still living there. And I went to school in Curwensville, went to 55th School, and when I came back from there, I went to work for Harry Gates. And from there, I worked in Granton at his hardware for 3 years. And from there, I went to Uniontown Hardware. Then I came back in the spring, and I found a wife. Found a girlfriend. And from then on, I formed went into partnership with Terry Bauman and Russell Bauman, formed a hardware company. And in 1939, I bought the shares and formed a loan company named under the name of Rice Hardware. And then I operated there until the time I retired in 1963. And from then on, I lived in Curwensville and still here.
Thank you, John. Clifford?
I'm Clifford A. Kelly. I was born in Curwensville on Bennington Avenue in the house where my sister still resides. I went to Curwensville School, and upon graduation, I took a job as manager of a Workman's Cash Grocery store in Curwensville, and I was there for about 10 years. And I worked then at almost all the other industries in Curwensville at different times. And in 1936, I opened and operated Kelly's Shoe Store, and I was there until 1970. And at that time, I retired, and they were looking for somebody to be caretaker of the cemetery. I went up there, and I was there for 10 years. And since that, I have been retired and have done nothing.
Jim?
Where was Berkman located?
Down the Central Hotel Building,
Central Hotel
where the
building?
bar is now.
Clifford, you might mention who your sister is that lives in the homestead.
Marty Quitten is my oldest sister. She lives in the homestead. I have another sister, Elizabeth, married to Winchell McCrory. They live in Du Bois, and I have a brother, Ed, that died 4 years ago.
Leonard?
I was born in Altoona in 1902. Went through part of the schooling over in Altoona, came to Curwensville in 16 and graduated here in 1919. I don't think my history is quite as replete as some of these gentlemen here, outside of working in the retail field and being in the store business. When we came to Curwensville, an uncle of ours owned the Boston store, which is on the corner of State and Silver, and we took over that store. And then from there we went down to the old Fred J. Dyer building and operated the store there. Then we eventually got into the 5 and 10 cent business, or the dollar stores. And the biggest part of my life was spent in the retail field. In the last 10 years, I opened up a little business of my own in the advertising specialty field. And though semi-retired, I have enjoyed being part of Curwensville. And sitting here and visiting with these elder statesmen, as somebody calls them, and listening to the stories that they have to tell, this group represents, in age, over 500 years of age of the group we have here. And I believe that we have all contributed something to the Curwensville area as a matter of tradition, and I believe our roots have really sunk so deep as to be able to say to people we are proud that we are part of Curwensville. Excuse me, part of Curwensville. I believe that the average person that we talk to envy the fact that Curwensville has a renowned reputation for being one of the friendliest places that a person can live in. There is always a hand outstretched to those who need a helping hand. And I have seen this in so many instances, and I have witnessed it so many times. And I can truthfully say that I have been very, very proud to be part of the tradition of Curwensville for these many years.
Well, thank you, Leonard. Would you like to tell where your family lived, your father and Jake and
Well, in those times it was cheaper to move than pay rent. So we had a number of homes here. When we first came, we lived up on Silver Street there. I forget the second or third house above the present church. And from there, we moved into a home that, trying to think of the gentleman's name, he worked for the brickyard. It was up across from the, no, it was across from the, above Ashley Bloom's place. It was across from the old Cross building, the tannery building up there. And, Maui. Yeah, we moved into the old Al Murray home. We were there for a number of years, and then eventually we moved up, the family moved up to the house that the Myers live in now, the old F.J. Dyer home. And then, well, that was about it until we lived in the F.J. Dyer home, and then we moved up to the Al Murray home. And I was in the service. I spent about 3 years in the construction battalion, CB, spent 2 of those out in the South Pacific. In fact, I enlisted when I was 42 years of age at that time. And I have had quite a life, enjoyed it, and I'm thankful that I am here today.
Mm-hmm. Well, your brother Jake lived in the homestead up until he passed away, didn't he?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. We were going to discuss who went to school together, who were classmates. Joe, didn't you mention you were...
Kelly and I graduated together. Snoopy and I are classmates.
Well, that's interesting. Who was your first grade teacher?
Maud Elders.
Maud Elders. Yours too, I presume. How about you, Joe?
Debbie Reed.
Pardon?
Debbie Reed.
Debbie Reed.
Institution. Like my brother.
You went to her too, Tony?
No. Debbie Reed was in
No, but you two went to, you went to school, yeah. So you went to the South Side School then, after that to the South Side School. How about the Locust Street School?
I went there.
You went there too?
I went there. Yeah.
And
Yeah, they had the two schools. They had the Southside School. They had the first and second grade. Then we went over to the Patton grade, the third grade. Then down the Locust Street to the fourth grade. Then up to Patton to the fifth. Down to the Locust Street to the sixth. And then went up to the seventh, eighth, and finished there. That was the first year when I was in seventh grade. They took the seventh and eighth grade into high school, and they sort of went
junior high type
yeah,
thing.
they started on that. But
Have any of you any reminiscence of World War I, anything, or have you heard anyone talking about things that happened in the community at that time? I can remember Leonard's brother Jake marching in parades with his World War I uniform on. Can anybody recall anything else that happened in Curwensville during that period?
I wonder if the group recalls the first flu epidemic that they had here during World War I, when they closed down the traffic between Clearfield and Curwensville, and there's no more than 3 or 4 people allowed to congregate at any one point. The town closed down, what was it, about 5 o'clock every evening. There was no movement, no social life, no schools, nothing following 5 o'clock in the evening.
They used the room for hospital.
Hospital and a mortuary too. They had, I forget the numbers, but it was one of the worst epidemics that had ever struck this, the entire country as far as that's concerned. But it was one of the worst epidemics that ever hit this section here. They had morgues placed almost all, every place. Had used some of the buildings here for morgues and things, along with the medical needs that they had. People were afraid to associate with anybody.
I recall Dr. Blair telling me, Mary and I were very close friends, his daughter, and he told me they'd used the Moose Hall for hospital facility.
hospital.
Yes, and he said in later years, this was probably in early 40s that he talked about, he said that more people died with pneumonia than with the flu because they didn't know, they felt that they needed fresh air at that time, and they threw all the windows open so they'd get lots of fresh air, and he said they developed pneumonia. And so what had been at the flu epidemic, he said, it began as flu and the people died with pneumonia, actually. And do you recall that, Joe?
This all happened back in 1918, 1919.
Yes, that's what he said. I think there's been a book written about that, too.
Probably.
It mentions Clearfield County and the flu epidemic. Do you remember it?
I remember the first casualty of World War I. I'm pretty sure it was from it's few related. As far as the name, I don't remember his first name. Adam. He had died, and they really had a big parade for him. There was a huge.
They had a viewing down at the Opera House. I remember that. You remember that?
Yes.
I remember his fiancée, boy, she cried and tried to get to her house.
Well, where did he die? Where did he die,
At
Tom?
camp, I
He
think.
died in the service.
He died at camp.
I see.
But was it flu related?
Yes, he died from the flu. He wasn't
Was it a war casualty?
He died in camp.
And they brought him back here then for burial. Those of you, someone mentioned them being a flagman at the railroad. Who mentioned that a little earlier?
John did.
The guard.
they had the guards during the war to protect the railroad bridges against sabotage because the Germans coming over here blowing them up and things like that. And first they brought the Pennsylvania National Guard in. They had a big tent down here in the football field down there, and they stationed them at all these different places here and on out Meeting all cut up in New York Central and all. And they were here until they then activated them into the service, and we got into the service, and then they put private in. I can remember, Mr. Fox, remember Mr. Fox? I can see him sitting out at one end of that the truck across there, the private. But they thought they had to be protected, and that's
John Fox is dead.
What?
John Fox.
Yeah, old Warren Fox. John and Vern's dad. He had the store. Talk about stores. Southside of me had 2 stores, Fox's and Tommy Smales. So that's him, you know. He was right alongside of our house, you know, so. And over in town here, you had 3 meat markets. Chippy Tate, and Art Davison, that's Bob Davison's, Dorsey's father. And my dad ran the meat market for him. They had Dixie's store, kind of a department. My dad ran the meat market. Then down on the Silver Street, McNall's, A.I. McNall's. Those are the 3. And the 2 big groceries, the Dyers had the big grocery down there, and then Art had a grocery up here, and Thornton Heil had one down this store, down in the basement there, under the building where Boston store was. I remember that later on.
That big building on the corner.
Later on,
Well, this was, yes, but before that, Mrs. Spencer had a store there.
Spencer's were there.
Yes, and then downstairs. Yes, and later Woodward's.
Yeah,
Yes, Woodward's had a grocery store.
Then the Boston store took over from Spencer's.
Oh, is that?
That was later on.
Because,
That's where Thornton Heil, you know, Thornton Heil had the grocery in there.
How you live up in the house where
Could have been
Big
reversed,
Rannigan
yeah.
is now.
And,
Pappy Pete.
Oh, it's Happy Pete, yeah. Oh, they
There were a quarter shop.
yes, over there, there was, in, where, Buzzard had store was, old Happy Pete had, he was an old boy, that, he had Dollar James, and, he was,
well, we had then, after that, right below that building was the Burgess, Mr. Carstetter, and then we have Carstetter's bakery shop there. Yeah,
that's
and they so,
bakery,
right.
Carstetter had his bakery and he made ice cream, and the fellow named was Clute.
Dairy, milk dairy.
Yeah, had the milk dairy
Oh.
down where
Where Mr. Coffee plays now.
down
There on the corner.
That's where White
Yeah.
Fiber,
On the
Egan
corner,
Plumbing
the
is.
corner.
Oh, yeah.
Still an apartment. No, he just had that one side.
And then we had McLaughlin's. Wasn't it Smith's funeral parlor and furniture in the red brick building? So that sort of takes care of Lower Filbert Street.
That was the Tanner store.
Yes, right,
Of course, when Smith was there, he had the whole thing.
yes, and then,
The furniture store and Undertaker both.
right.
when I first remember, Jim Smith, the undertaker, was in the old Ira building where Claude Bloom had.
Yeah.
Yes,
And back in the back end was an office, and Elliot Irvin had his stapling machine office in back there. He was quite a character. His home was down where the veterans have now.
and did he invent a stapler?
Well, he didn't invent it, but he got the patent right on it.
Uh-huh.
And for the world, the whole world.
Yes.
They send out
Uh-huh.
staplers from there, you know. Did a lot of business out there. He made a lot of money, and when he spent it, he was quite a punk. Well, then, of course, Dyer's was in the brick building. Well, after Dyer's closed, then Smith moved across in there into the brick building, his undertaking over there. And that's the building there was closed.
Well, we mustn't forget that John Wright's dad had a shoe store down there in the corner of that red brick building.
That's what John Wright said. Worked for Dyer in there, didn't he? I mean, he was then he had us his own shoe That was later on.
You know, a Sluggerhoff, that man named the Sluggerhoff got dire out, and he operated the store there for about 3 or 4 years.
Exactly.
And then Jim Smith lost the building after they closed.
And moved over.
At that particular time, what was in the Central? Anything other than a hotel?
I can always remember it as the Central Hotel.
It's always a barn hotel.
It's always been
It's
Central
always been
Hotel.
there, yeah, for years and years.
That was,
Since I was a boy, the Park Hotel was Park Hotel, and Central Hotel was Central Hotel.
Now, moving up to State Street, what other businesses were on State Street? Like Clifford, when you were in business, what other businesses were on State Street?
Well, Wilson Edmondson was located where the
Part of the library.
Curwensville County Library operates out of now.
Well, Smith, right down at the corner, Kurt,
Kurt,
and the barber shop, the old building.
Smith and Ruby's Barber Shop.
And then Dr. King.
right.
Then the next was Lou Robinson.
Lady Men's Shop and Men's Shop.
Yeah. Jerry Murphy.
It was Wrigley's then.
Yeah, it was Kay
Before they-
Wrigley's, wasn't it?
And then the Gray Hardware
Yeah?
was next there. Then comes...
Fritz Graff, that's the one that...
Fritz
Graff
Yeah,
is in
that's
there.
one tenor.
That's the one that everywhere.
That.
Leonard bought.
Then Wolf, then, do you...
Fleming's tobacco store.
Our store there.
Then Sari's 5 and 10, then where the office is
Yeah,
at the
that's right
library.
next to the bank.
Yes.
Where the
I think
Curwensville
you're getting
National
different
Bank was on the
decades
corner.
maybe.
Yes, I think, but yes, it was,
New stores, 5 and 10 cent
Millinery
stores.
stores and all sorts
And
of things.
Clifford, where you were, used to be Jim Smith and Camerucci had a barber shop there
On
for
the
years.
corner.
On the corner, well, that's where he was.
Well, they were on this end where the city drugstore is now. And where I was is where Lynn Doherty had a hardware.
Oh, yeah, that's
That was where Lynn was. That was the Kittleberger home.
Yeah.
And
Well, he was
Lynn
married to a
lived in
Kittleberger,
that,
yeah.
and he married a Kittleberger girl, and he lived in that, and he bought out Gray's Hardware down below above the bank, where it is now. And then later on, Lynn closed that up and put a store building in the front of the house in there now, and that's when it became visible.
well, wasn't there at one time a butcher shop on Thompson Street there, back of
Well, that was Chippy Tate.
Chippy Tate's, right?
There used to be a pump there.
That was the old Kittleberger.
Oh.
The old Kittleberger.
They used to have the butcher shop.
Yep, the old time. That's Harry Kittleberger's dad and George Kittleberger's dad.
You
And,
mentioned, you mentioned the pump. Wasn't there also down at the, what we call our square, a watering trough or something that's
Yeah, big rounder.
big round one for the horses?
And then, had a
Anybody
fountain.
remember that?
You could drink, you had a fountain right up from the
Oh,
sidewalk.
did they? Is that about where the Kovac store was?
You know, right in front of where Hanneman, you got,
Oh, yeah, the auto store, yeah.
excuse me, John, maybe you can remember too.
Yes, I
The day that we come out of school one day and we went down past Doherty's Hardware, and there was a big hole in the plate glass. And we all looked, we were kids. And what happened there? The story I can remember is that, oh, Doodle, he thought there wasn't a shotgun from the shotgun, he shot through it. That was such a big round. You remember that? You remember that hole in that?
I remember that hole. I remember that hole.
And we forgot one other thing on State Street. The post office was between Fleming and
I don't want to interrupt. Well, let's finish the one side of State Street and then come down.
Oh,
All right.
we haven't done it.
Well, I haven't finished the other side yet. You're going to get up to Lodge Drugstore then.
Yes,
Lodge
yes.
Drugstore, you know.
The reason I'm interested in that, some of you folks don't know this, but at Lodge Drugstore, that's where I trained. The prescription room, the room itself is still there. If any of you people go in there, We use that for nuts and bolts.
Well, where do we go to the live drugstore?
The Nip Hardware.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go in there and just ask him you want to see the old live prescription room. He's proud to show that.
That's a pretty fun.
It's tiny. I mean, we made everything in those days when I first started learning the pharmacy business.
Joe, I think it might be interesting to inject here that Babe Live, Mrs. Charles McCarl, gave the Curwensville County Historical Museum some of the materials and the little pill equipment to the museum, and it's on display on the second floor down there along with
the molds,
yeah, I went up one day and she gave them to us to present to the museum, and I think that's interesting because a lot of young people in Curwensville had no idea until they went to the Curwensville County Museum that this material's preserved there, which I think is interesting because it's probably some of the material you worked with when you were younger.
No, you folks are going up there to the food shop and all. You can go ahead.
Going up.
Incidentally, live, speaking of live, that's cigars. They sell cigars. Do you have the, I always remember, you used to sell the live later. Picture of Dave.
Oh.
Yeah.
He also had a fountain there, you know.
Yeah, they had.
And to be able to get the water for the soda, he had a barrel on a rocker down in the basement, and you'd go down there and rock that thing until you got enough of the.
The nicest thing that happened in my knowledge is when we had to chop ice twice a day to pack the ice cream, morning and evening. Then they came with these compressors. And no more chopping ice. Electric compressors, boy, you thought you were in heaven. And you could control the thickness of the ice cream. Keep the softness or the hardness of the ice cream. When you packed it, it got real hard. Then as the ice melted a little bit from the salt, then it got soft. You just couldn't control it. But when you got the compressor, it was always the way you wanted it. You just set it.
Do you have any idea, Joe, about approximately what year that was?
No, I don't. I started there in 2023.
So it was probably in the 20s. Yes, that's interesting.
When they were rocking that barrel down the basement for the water, that was back in about 1718.
The soda water.
Yes, soda water. They had this barrel down on a rocker. And you'd get and when you were all through, you'd go up there and you'd get a scoop of ice cream for nothing.
The tanks were in vogue in the 20s.
Yeah, well, this is back in 1718.
Boy, when those
That's
carburetors
interesting.
that was heaven.
Then, of course, Jimmy Sheridan opened up his sweet shop, and the honey sweet shop, and he also had quite a grocery store there for a long time. Jimmy was a big operator.
We stand curses here. Tony was right on that post office business.
Oh, yeah, that's.
We want to go back down State Street a little bit.
All right, back up then on...
I said about 6. Now you're going up the first line.
No, but you go back down to Fleming's Cigar Store down in there.
Yeah.
That's where the post office is.
The Fleming Cigar Store, and then the next there was that Stairway. And up in the Stairway, Squire Dale had his office, and Roland Swope had his office up there.
The telephone office was up there.
Telephone.
Dell telephone.
OCC.
Now, approximately what years are we talking about,
Well, between 1915
Tony.
and 1920.
in that era?
That's what I
Yeah. Well, that's...
And right now, what's there?
Well, in the 20s, because
Right now, though.
well, the post office was still there in 1930.
Still where?
But still,
But the library's there now.
yeah.
The county's part of the library.
The post, they moved the post office from there up to the next block.
Mhm.
Where Pizza Store used to be. The post office was there They were there until they built this.
Well, the reason I know the post office was there in 1930, that's when I started the drugstore. And I had on my label, opposite the post office is just as reliable. And I was telling Clifford, pretty soon the post office was getting mad, and I wasn't quite so reliable, so I quit using that slogan.
I run across a tag. I gave Bob Pickle and Davidson. There's a Bickford store. And that was up on the corner where the County National Bank is, not the county, but the Central Bank in Texas. They had a big store.
Now, what year was that, Tony?
Well, I can remember when we first moved here, we had boarders, and they'd get paid. They worked at the brickyard, and they'd go to and pay them. We didn't get paid in cash, except I think at that time most everybody paid in cash. And I know that's when we got a bag of silver candy. You get your pay and they give you a bag of silver candy. We got the silver candy. When we first started getting candy. But when not in the quarter, we didn't get any candy.
Right, so we're
Going up past Jimmy Street Cross, there's a alleyway, the Packway had a store in there. So, and then next to it, there was, I believe, Dr. H had his office in there.
Doc H was across the street from there.
No, he was up first.
First before he moved across
He
there.
moved down there.
And then and then there was an open place there, and then went into Arcade Way. And then next to him was a restaurant.
And Doc Homan was upstairs.
Well, he came home and came later. Yeah, that's later. He came in my time, later on. No, but this was the back Arcade Way, and the Western Union office was in Arcade Way. Arcade Way was a telegraph operation, and he had the Western Union back there until later on they moved it down to the station. And then next to him was the restaurant.
He had Patel's, had that?
One time they had it, yeah.
Patel.
And another time, they had one. It's always handy.
But Patel was the first.
Patel was at it one time, but before him, Haney. When I was, that's just a little kid, Haney, that's Franklin Haney and them, why, his grandmother.
When I was a boy, I remember a Livingston restaurant under your place in the basement there.
Yeah. That is down there.
Down in the summer.
But then, beyond that, was a pool room. We always had a pool room there.
Harvey Hawk.
That's the one arm mother, had it for a long time. And then
Locker house.
That's right.
Where the Ford garage is now.
The old rocker house. It wasn't in operation, but there was a Simon. Simon had a closed.
Simon had a laundry in there.
Yeah, laundry in there,
Simon moved down to Silver Street.
Right,
Is that right?
in there, and then on up in the next building was a hardware store.
Big hardware.
Bell Gate Hardware. And then Montelius lived in the corner.
Montelius on the corner.
That's that went across the church going up like that. But that's
the same today.
You don't want to go all the way up to Grampian now, do you? No.
we went across the street there and come down from the Patton building.
That was Bickford store.
yeah, Bickford store was on the corner.
That was that three-story building, you would remember that, where she was bumped
Yes.
to the lake.
Yes.
And the old Robinson home was next
And then
to
right
that.
next to that was Abe Robinson.
Old Abe Robinson.
Yes.
Later on bought by Doc Earhart when he moved here. A lot of the later people remember him. What?
No, Grandy lived in
No,
the
Grandy.
Next house was a pool room was.
Grandy's at that time lived over in the sandy desert over there.
Look right back of the Catholic church.
Yeah, back
Yes,
there, yeah.
Oh.
And but was that was never much of a business place When I was a kid.
Then the Thompsons lived in the next house, remember?
And they had, the fridge, the express.
Well, where the floral shop is now, used to be the old express office.
Adams Express, and then they had the plumbing
shop.
and then Squire's Prep.
No, that was Kelly's bowling alley.
That was below Ramcat Alley.
Ramcat Alley was there. This is true. There was an alley there.
Yeah, there was an alley went up
Ramcat
there.
Alley.
How'd he get the
I
name?
used to set up timber.
Oh, they got all kinds of names around there.
How did he get the name, Joe?
And right,
They were always doing Ramcat Alley.
and right next to that, you know, and the first I can remember when I was a kid, Bloom, old Mr. Bloom, that had a little grocery store there. That's Minner Bloom's dad. The old singing Jim, we called him. He was one of those, had that. And then there was a building in there that had different things in. But
That's where the old Nickelodeon.
I was going to say that's the first moving picture I saw. Was in that building. Called the Nickelodeon.
Now, what is in the building that the Nickelodeon was in?
Well,
It's,
the post office there, that's all.
oh, it was the one that was in the fire.
That's why this is all changed. There used
Yes.
to be Owens in there, there was the harness shop,
Harness.
Dr. Nicholas Ferdinand Kelly H.
Yeah.
Was there a harness shop in along there, Joe?
Archway's father-in-law.
Father-in-law, Mr.
Oh.
Owens.
Yeah.
He had the harness
He
shop.
owned the one building, and the other, the first building was tore down, but the second one was the Owens' owned. That's
Yeah,
Arcade.
See, that all burnt. That was just
Well,
one, but
and
wood.
they Arcade
One
built
story.
Yeah.
they put the rebuilding
Yeah,
up.
We forgot about the Mountaineer, remember that
Well,
road?
no, that was on down. You have to go on down into the next
You had
building.
your printing shop
Where
in
the-
there too.
Where
What's that?
Fred Robinson.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
But you go below that, seen that right alongside of Fred. And then in the corner house, Fred didn't have his place there, but all the insurance man, Rohrbach.
When was, what years was the Curwensville Herald there?
Yeah, I was just gonna ask you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We
that's
forgot down on Toby Street when old